He was the king of martial arts films, a graceful, magnetic performer destined to become a Hollywood superstar. Sadly, Bruce Lee did not live long enough to see his destiny fulfilled. I'm Peter Graves, and this is Biography. In 1969, Bruce Lee wrote a note to himself predicting he would become the highest-paid Oriental superstar in the U.S., and that by 1970 he would achieve world fame. Well, by 1970, Bruce Lee's action-packed kung fu films had made him famous throughout much of the world. But it wasn't until his sudden death in 1973 that American audiences discovered him. Since then, Bruce Lee has become an icon. His films have exploded in popularity, and martial arts academies across the country are filled with kids and grown-ups who want to learn to be like Bruce Lee. But even more remarkable than Bruce Lee's enduring popularity are the number of myths surrounding his life and death. In this hour, we'll try to sort them out. Join us as Biography presents the life of martial arts master and movie star, Bruce Lee.
My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee.
Now, what is this thing you do?
It's a Chinese form called Gung Fu.
Kung Fu is Kung Fu. It's not child's play.
Bruce Lee to Kung Fu is John Wayne to Westerns. Is Baryshnikov or Nureyev to ballet. Is Michael Jordan to basketball.
I mean, you gotta put the whole hip into it and snap it.
The year is 1971, the city of Hong Kong, and the martial artist Bruce Lee is already a hero in this city of 4 million. He's about to become a box office sensation throughout the world.
There are a lot of martial artists that come close to where Bruce was physically, using his techniques and everything. But I haven't seen anybody take Bruce's techniques any further.
Bruce Lee has already been. He's the standard that everybody has to adhere to. He's the one that made them all want to be martial artists.
I wouldn't if I were you.
No matter how good any other martial artist is, no one has had the ability to combine filmmaking savvy, emotional power, and precision that Bruce Lee embodied.
How do you like that?
I never thought he would get as famous as he did. Because to me, he was Sifu Bruce Lee, my instructor, and I wanted the knowledge he had, not only in martial art, but in life in general.
Martial art has a very, very deep meaning as far as my life is concerned, because as an actor, as a martial artist, as a human being, all these I have learned from martial art.
Bruce Lee was born in 1940 in San Francisco, where his actor father and his mother happened to be touring with a Hong Kong opera company. The Lee family soon returned to Hong Kong, where this gag photo shows how early his father was pushing an acting career for Bruce. And Bruce would go on to star in more than a dozen movies as a child.
The kind of roles that Bruce Lee played in these movies was always the rebel, the street kid, the wisecracker. He was great at pouting. He was great at showing big emotions, anger, sadness.
The dubbed film shows him in one of his little tough guy roles.
What are you doing here?
I came here to beat you up, you old bully. Now I'll kill you.
His on-screen role of tough guy matched his off-screen life. He was a hell-raising teenager in frequent fights on the rough and tumble streets of Hong Kong, where he hung out with his friends. The martial arts take discipline, so Bruce's parents were happy to pay for his training with Yip Man, a renowned teacher of Kung Fu, or Gung Fu in Cantonese. All Gung Fu combines hand-to-hand combat with spiritual training. Wing Chun, the style Bruce studied, followed the movements of animals. Ever the smooth mover, Bruce took his grace to the dance floor as well, becoming the cha-cha champion of Hong Kong in 1958. In 1959, Bruce returned to the place of his birth, America, leaving his troublemaking days in Hong Kong behind. In Seattle, a family friend named Ruby Chow put him to work in her restaurant. The intensity Bruce brought to improving his martial arts skills, he also brought to a study of just about everything else. And he attended the University of Washington to study philosophy. There he met and admired high school student Linda Emery.
I first saw Bruce Lee when I was a senior in high school. And he would come to my high school because he was a friend of the philosophy teacher. And he would give guest lectures on Chinese philosophy. And we would all see Bruce Lee down at the end of the hall, and all of us girls would go, ooh, you know, Bruce Lee is here, that guy, he's here, you know. And we all thought he was so cute and everything. And that summer, I went down to Chinatown and we took Kung Fu lessons. I mean, this was like the most foreign thing I had ever done.
Bruce led trips to Chinese restaurants and movies after class.
But I must say I was shocked when he first asked me out on a date. And when he did ask me out to go to the Space Needle for dinner, and I was so amazed. I said, you mean everybody is going to go to the Space Needle? And he said, no, just you. And I was like, oh. So that was the beginning.
And 1 year later, in 1964, Bruce Lee and Linda Emery married.
Back in those days, marrying someone outside of your race was just not done. But it was just one of those times in your life that happens very rarely when you know absolutely you are doing the right thing.
That same year, Bruce opened a Kung Fu school in Oakland, California. Bruce's teaching was unique, combining elements of several Kung Fu styles.
I felt that the people came to him because he had something to offer that was different, and it was revolutionary at that time period.
There was more than a little skepticism about this young man who'd been schooled in one style of Kung Fu for just 5 years.
And so people thought, God, what an arrogant guy to change the ways of the masters that were 100 years before his time. But he was saying no, because everything evolves.
So even as he was winning fans with his new methods, he was making enemies as well. And some of these enemies were perfectly willing to challenge him in the coming years. Biography's look at Bruce Lee will continue in a moment.